Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dear Asian Americans. We are continuing to talk to amazing people in our community, learning about their origin story, how they became that Dash American that most of us identify with. Today, I am super excited to have my friend Nathan on the show. Nathan and I go little ways back. Our day five guest or episode five guest, if you remember, was Paul Kim, who started the global movement called Collaboration that brought so many of us together. And it is through that organization that Nathan and I had crossed paths. We both volunteered at a number of shows. Um, Nathan has captured the magical memories of so many weddings and so many events around Southern California. You see the pictures of his beautiful family right behind him there. He's captured some beautiful moments of my own family. Um, but Nathan's story is so special and unique to me. And when I thought about doing this show, he was one of the very first people that I really wanted to have on this show, because I think he has a story that, like so many others, we don't share too much of. And so, really grateful for him making time. We are both fathers of little tiny people. So we are recording pretty late in the evening here, almost 10 p.m. We're also very lucky to be both husbands of healthcare workers. So it is an interesting time for both. And I think it, if anything, really provides a little bit more perspective to how we view the world and how we view ourselves. Hey, Nathan, thank you so much for making time for the show.
No, thank you, Jerry. Thanks for having me on.
It's so one of the first things I always find curious is when I meet people who look Korean but don't have traditional Korean last names. So, we can start there, or tell us about Nathan Nowack in your own words.
Yeah, it's a very common interpretation of when people meet me for the first time. If they've never seen my photo, they go, "Oh, your name totally threw me off." So I mean, it's I mean it's even when I hang out with my parents, my so being adopted, both my parents, my dad is German, Irish, and my mom is um, Czech German. And so we're all hanging out, and people look at us and go, "Oh, so how do you guys know each other?" Well, it's my parents.
Right.
But yeah, it's a little bit of an identity thing that yeah, it's gone my entire life, I guess.
Sure. Where's home for you, and how did you? You just shared with us you were adopted. Um, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Oklahoma, in a little town called Bartlesville. I was adopted at 5.5 months old from Seoul, and then South Korea came over pretty much right after I got adopted. And my parents raised me in Oklahoma for 18 years until I went to college.
Okay. And what sort of town was Bartlesville, Oklahoma? Were there um, other folks that looked like me and you? A lot of those, or what was the circumstances like?
Other than my sister, who was also adopted 3 years prior to me arriving, there was, I think, 3 or 4 other Asians in the high school of 400 students. So not
Interesting.
many.
Yeah.
Yeah, not many at all.
Um, and I guess this could be a more general sense or general, thoughts on, your friends and other folks in the adoption community. How did, and it must be so difficult. I don't know what that must feel like, so I don't want to make any sort of judgments. But, um, what did your parents do to help you, identify with, your identity? Because obviously, as you just joked, which I'm sure happens more often than you'd like, people don't make the automatic assumption that are your actual parents, the people that
Hmm.
raise you and love you. But on the flip side, there must be, I hope that there is some consideration for, hey, this is where you're from and this is how you came into our lives. And, tell me a little bit about how that was in your early childhood.
Yeah, they were very open with any questions I had about my history, my upbringing, my adoption. I mean, it wasn't a situation where I just, you know, was told one day that I was adopted. I kind of knew that
Not
I
a
didn't look like
surprise.
my parents, and so I think and the moment I understood what the word adoption meant is when I started talking to them about it,
Yeah.
and they always were very open to anything I had questions about. They weren't secretive. I have the best parents
Yeah.
I could have ever hoped for. It's been a great uh, family relationship. I've heard horror stories about some adoption situations that were not as kind as mine, but so they let me do research. They would talk
Mm.
to me about all the moments and show me photos when I first arrived, and that was great. That really it sparked a lot of interest, but at the time, I mean, we didn't have the internet at the
Right.
time, so everything was books.
Right.
So I had an encyclopedia.
Sure. Curious about that. I think, if you are, a younger adopted brother or sister of ours, trying to find more about where you come from, whether it be Korea or anywhere else, you get a cell phone or, a browser, and you can learn about as much or connect with people, or, certainly makes it easier to find people if you are on a search for your biological parents or whatnot. Um, when did you start seeking things that were Korean, and was there a natural draw to it? I don't imagine, as you mentioned, the lack of Asian folks in Bartlesville. Not a whole lot of Korean restaurants,
Yeah,
right? So, like, what
yeah,
was that? Tell me about that.
yeah. I didn't really know much about you know anything about Korean heritage or the culture. I kind of probably did the stereotypic thing where I lumped everything together in an Asian category. So Chinese food, Japanese food,
Hmm.
it all was Asian. And so I sadly never had Korean barbecue until I actually came to California. So it was probably, I'd say, a couple years after I had arrived. So I'd say probably 2003, 2004. So I was well into my 30s when I was, had Korean
Hey,
barbecue.
better late than never, right? Better late
I
than
know.
never.
I was sad I had missed all those years of having it, but
And look at all the good
so
meat in Oklahoma, right? Like, it's beef country, so
yeah,
you
all
just
I
gotta
had
cook.
was steak though, steak, potatoes,
Yeah,
chicken
just
fried steak, barbecue, and that was
same
my
same cow,
meats.
just cook it differently, right? Tell me about your 20s. What did you study in school, and what did you want to be? And yeah, how was that like?
So, I always loved computers. So ever since computers actually started, coming out, we had one as a kid, and then the school started getting them, and I just really enjoyed computers. So my first instinct was to go to school and become like a computer science major and start
Mm.
programming. And I really wanted to do anything that had to do with that because I loved video games. And so I think in the back of my head I was like I was going to develop a video game or work for a video game company, and so I went to Colorado State University and got into the computer science department and started learning. But quickly did I find out that it was very tedious and boring, and I didn't like it. So I kind of switched majors into the business administration category, but still with an emphasis in computer information systems. And so that's where I pretty much took it, and that's really when computers really were booming at that point.
I find it fascinating that you ended up doing engineering anyway, because the stereotype goes, Asian parents always nudge us or pressure us or guilt us into, one of three things on the menu of jobs. And if you deviate and become a photographer or a guy that makes podcasts, like, it's off the menu. I find it almost comical, that even without the traditional parent pressures of pushing you to engineering, that's what you ended up choosing. um, so perhaps maybe it is genetic. I don't know.
Yeah,
Just kidding,
there's
it's
a
not
lot
genetic.
of
It's not
oh,
genetic,
trust me,
guys. Yep.
there's a lot of things that I've fallen into a stereotypic category of being Asian. I drove an Acura Integra. I played table tennis since I was like competitively since I was 16.
Wow,
So yeah, I even went to the nationals and everything for table tennis. So it
that's
was,
pretty cool.
yeah,
I
not to
they
fall into that stereotype, but I did. So I liked it.
Some people believe cells and DNA have memory, so it might actually not. I can't explain the Integra thing. That's all on you, um, but yeah, fascinating. I mean, so now you are a very successful, entrepreneur in the creative world here in Southern California and beyond. In the world of photography. I don't imagine you graduated from Colorado State and just started taking pictures. Tell me, what did you do initially, and then how did it evolve into your chosen field now?
Yeah, so the first job that I got out of college, after applying to tons of different types of jobs in the computer field or just the business networking sides of things, I landed a job with a friend actually doing DVD production.
Hmm.
And so the DVD production was starting out with all different types of you know, movies or corporate reels or things like that. And I got a job actually, an offer here in California, and that's what brought me out here. So I came out, was doing some teaching for DVD, but then also programming. And the multimedia industry was just growing so quickly. So I stuck with that for about 6 years until that shifted more toward high definition Blu-rays and also digital. And that's kind of where I tapered off and started looking at other things.
Um, did you always have a love for photography, or was that something you fell into as you grew up?
I have always loved photography. Funny enough, my dad is actually a hobby photographer.
Huh.
Back in the day, he actually did black and white film development in our basement. And so I used to think that was really cool and different, but I wasn't as interested in that side of things. But my dad's a chemist, so he had all the
Oh,
chemicals that he used to develop it. So he uh, that it was an interesting thing that he did. My mom's also an artist, so she paints. So the combination of photography and art, I don't know, maybe I got some of that through osmosis or something, but for some reason I started doing some photography in college, not thinking I would do it as a career, but just doing it as a hobby.
awesome.
Just took off.
I mean, good choice, right? Because we still look at regularly the photos you took of the three of us about a year ago, and the amazing memories that you have brought. Um, I want to ask a question about your reconnection with your family, which you shared about publicly, and you had the great fortune of reconnecting with your siblings um, a few years ago. Share with us about that experience. How did it come about, um, and I guess was it something that you sought out, or how did that
Mhm.
happen?
And so one of the things you kind of previously asked me about how my parents were about my adoption and how open they were. They have definitely never said I couldn't look for my family or restricted any information from me. They've always been very open, and I was always kind of like, I have no need. I didn't really want to search for my family. I had such a good family
Hmm.
already that I wasn't missing anything. I wasn't looking for, um, you know, a missing puzzle piece. And so I just never looked. And then all of a sudden, in 2014, I had actually seen a documentary about a Korean rapper, Korean American rapper, Dan Matthews, and he had a story, a documentary called AKA Dan, and went to the premiere of that. And as I was watching it, I connected with his story, and I said, yeah, that's actually there's so many things about that I thought, oh, this would be really cool if I actually did search out, my family just for the heck of it and for the medical reasons and just to finally maybe just do it. And so my wife pushed me a little bit too. It's like you should do it. It's medical history, and so I decided, okay, let me just look for see what happens. And so I did. I connected with the adoption agency, and that's where I started. And to just ask, okay, what's the process?
And what was the process for you? Was it physically going to Korea and having that first meeting, or was there a touch point before you made the journey?
So it was pretty basic as far as the starting point. They give you a packet and say fill out all this information. They wanted to find out a what your reasons for finding the family were. Uh, B, they wanted to make sure you were emotionally capable of handling it because there could potentially be some outcomes for searching for my family that they didn't want to either be liable for, but that they also wanted to be concerned for my safety as well. And so they made sure to cover everything. I mean, they covered topics that I didn't even think about. Of course, there was the most common that I would think of is that you want to connect with your family, and then you find out that they don't want to connect with you.
Right.
So that would probably, that feeling of rejection would be kind of maybe tough for some people. So I filled out all the answers, to the best of my ability, and I was ready to do it. It wasn't expensive to do it, and they did give you a realistic number. They said about 10% of the people who look will find some information. The other 90% won't get anything back.
That's very low. Is that
Yeah.
a systemic lack of ability to connect with people from 20, 30 years ago? Or is that, and if the other side says no, they just chalk it up to, unsearchable or unfindable?
I think it's a lot of those reasons. They also said there's a lot of I guess bad record keeping too from back in the day. So there were stories, for example, I had heard a few stories that when some kids were dropped off to the adoption agencies, they were just dropped off on the doorstep. So they didn't really have
Mhm.
any clue or any history or anything. And so they didn't have names. Sometimes they just would make up names of the individuals with whatever nurse or person found the child, that was their name. And so, yeah.
I there's somebody else in our mutual network, Professor Sarah Park Dallin, who went to UCLA from LA, and is a very vocal proponent of sharing adoptee stories. And so something I learned by hearing a conversation she had was, just the context of transnational adoption out of Korea to basically the middle of America um, in the 70s and in the 80s, that just made it really, I hate to use the word popular, but it became more of a thing than it had ever been before. And
Mhm.
so, I find that the context extremely helpful of when and how this happened, because it wasn't, I believe there was, at least in the state of Minnesota, an organization that really pulled for local families in the Minneapolis area to start adopting children out of Korea. And so that's why there's a pattern, or at least um, some sort of density of Korean American adoptees or Korean adoptees in Minneapolis. Um, and so you went to Korea to meet your siblings. Did you get a chance to talk
Yes.
to them before?
So once I set up all the paperwork and made the first connection through them, the reply actually came back fairly quickly. I think it was maybe a month or
Oh,
so before the reply came back that they had found something. I remember getting the phone call and they said, "Are you ready for this?" And I was like, "Yeah." They go, "We contacted the agency and they contacted the last known address, and your brother responded." And I was like, "Oh wow, okay." And so they go, "So you have a brother?" And I was like, "Great." And you also have five sisters. So I had found out that I was the seventh child, the youngest sibling, and they had all been waiting to hear from me. And so
wow.
they had actually searched on their side, but it was a closed adoption, so there wasn't anything they could do to find me. I had to be the one to open the the file. And so once that happened, they they jumped on it as quickly as possible to send as much information back to me to make sure that I knew that this was my family. And so the first thing they sent back was a photo of my brother, my parents, and my brother's wife. And the photo, when after seeing it, was like, "Yep, that's
That's me.
that's my family." Because my brother looked like a little bit older version of me in the photo, and it was uncanny and surreal. So, uh, So from that point on, it was like, okay, let's start connecting. So the agency, which is Dylan International, they actually acted as the mediator for a while. So they made sure that everything was kosher and nothing was going to be getting weird. They translated for me, which was another thing. My family doesn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Korean, so they had to make sure to translate properly. And everything went well for the first month, and then finally they told me that my youngest sister uh, was coming to the United States, to Los Angeles, and she wanted to meet me. And so they sent, this was 2015, and they sent me the contact information of how to get in contact with her. And she helped, she used a translator, one of her friends who actually spoke English, and we translated on where to meet, when, and so that was it. So I went to the Staples Center area, and we met up, and that was the first time meeting a biological family member. And instantly I looked at her and I was like, yep, she kind of looked like a female version of me. and, and so yeah.
Was it as dramatic as they make it seem on Korean TV?
For, it had, I was, more along the lines of just kind of taking it slowly. I wanted to see them. I knew that I wouldn't be able to say too much, but it was still really exciting. I mean, it was very just again surreal to me. It was like kind of a reality show. uh, the more I thought about it, and this is something that later when I actually met the rest of my family, that I kind of didn't realize, that I had just found out about them 4 or 5 months earlier, but they had actually known about me for the last 40 years. So for 40 years, in anticipation of trying to find me and wait for me, they finally accomplished that and found me. Whereas for me, it was a little bit like 4 months. So I think it was a different feeling from both sides,
Yeah.
and I could see that in their eyes after each of my siblings. After meeting them, you could see that they had all just they had this, like, I don't know, this feeling of like, wow, I can't believe we finally found you, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
What did you guys talk about?
So. Well, so I know I didn't want to go too like deep into the family history when I first met my sister, because I was just meeting her for the first time. I didn't
Right.
want to go, hey, so why was I adopted? So I tried to tread lightly, talk about the family. What do they do? What is everyone? How old is everybody? Kids? Do I have nephews and nieces? So it was very basic at first. I found out without asking, that one of the first things that she said was that my oldest sister, who at the time I guess is like 20 plus years older than me,
Oh.
yeah, so she's in her late 60s now. She had a son 10 days after I was born. And so
Wow.
that's one of the reasons why I didn't stay with a family member, is because she was the oldest daughter, which normally probably would have taken me, was having her first son, and she couldn't take both kids. And it just wouldn't have been financially possible, or even, she was in her 20s and she's having her first son. So she had her son 10 days after me, and then I was put up for adoption. Mainly the reason that they told me was financial reasons. That back in the day, of course, Korea was a little more in poverty, and they just couldn't afford to keep me. So she raised her son, but they always, when they celebrated his birthday, thought about me because it was so close to when I was born. So.
What is the age gap between you and the closest, the sister that you met in LA?
So then my next youngest sister is 7 years older than me.
Okay, so there's still a decent age spread there. It wasn't
Yeah.
like everybody's clumped together and then 20 years later, boom, here comes Nathan.
Yeah. So everybody was pretty clumped together from her up, but
Yeah.
I was the only one that was probably a surprise. So
Ah,
yeah.
okay.
So that could be also one of the other reasons. I think my parents were already in their 50s probably at
Mm.
that time.
And so you're going through this. You're out here in LA with your wife. Obviously emotional, new, something that you may or may not have expected to go through at some point. Um, were your parents from Oklahoma involved in this process, and did you, share as much? And how did they support you in that way?
Yeah, they were very excited to hear about all the stories and see pictures. They again they knew from the moment I did the search through the agency. They knew the moment I found something. They saw the photos. They were always involved. I'm very open with my parents. I talk to them, you know, currently because of our situations. I'm talking to them almost every day, but it's still I talk to my parents fairly frequently just because of my parents and I'm really close with them. But so they were very excited for me, and they one of the things that they were fortunate enough to do is also after I guess the timeline here. So I met my sister, and then that was in 2015. 2 years later, in 2017, is when I actually went to Korea. I finally had the opportunity to go out there, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But
Yeah.
shortly after that, my brother actually came here that same year for my son's first birthday.
Wow.
And so my brother and his wife came, but my mom, my dad, and my sister were here also for that. So my brother actually got to meet my parents
That's
and my
so
sister,
cool.
and that was a kind of another thing that I really enjoyed seeing was including my parents
Right.
in meeting somebody from my biological family as well, not just me meeting them.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of emotional moments when they were here. One of them, which I didn't really understand at the time, but apparently they wanted to show my parents respect for raising me, so they got on their knees, hands and knees, and went all the way down to the floor and did a really, I guess, a very deep bow to them, and just they gave my parents presents, they gave me presents, they gave my sister presents. I mean, it was just a very interesting thing to see. And again, our communication was very limited. So I luckily had a friend who spoke Korean, and so she came over, and I had her here pretty much for a day. She actually came back even, but she helped translate for like 2 days, and it was just amazing to see all of the stuff that everyone would talk about.
You know, as a friend connected to you on Facebook, I, saw the pictures that you shared, and sort of, from a distance. And um I was happy for you, man. It's, I think it's, um those of us, so many of us, never even think about that, right? It is a privilege, an actual privilege, that so many of us, even myself, through most of my life, that you don't even think about, that you just take for granted, that it's not even a thought. um and I know, like you said, the overwhelming majority of folks, whether they want to or not, don't have an opportunity to connect. So um and so you go to Korea, and obviously them and their, your family and the extended family are, it's sort of
Mhm.
a homecoming feel.
Yep.
um w- w- Take me through that. What did you do with them? What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah. So that was it. I was excited to go. I had no expectations, but at the same time, I actually had no clue what was going to happen. So I was just going in, and I was in their hands. So whatever they had planned, I was going to do, but there was no communication about what was happening. And so I kind of was a little confused when I got there at first, but one of the first things they did when I got there, other than handing me flowers and crying a bunch, was they took me to go eat. So, that's a very big thing. And so I was very happy to sit down with them and have a meal. And they, showed me, what all the dishes were. And it was, it was a good meal. I really enjoyed it. And then from there, they took me to, uh, it, here's where the translation part came a little bit difficult. We were translating for the 3 days I was in Korea through an app on my phone and on his phone. So I would speak in English and it would translate to Korean, and they would do the same thing. They would speak in Korean to their app, and it would translate to English. And so we would just go back and forth like this and try to read what the other person was saying. I think it was about 70% accurate. There was a lot of moments where they would say something and it would show it to me and it didn't make any sense at all. And I could tell that sometimes I would say something and I'd show it to them and they just had a blank look on their face
Yeah.
too. And I couldn't get, so we had to kind of communicate in very simple, like yes, no questions sometimes, short answers, in kind of the grammar that you would speak to a 2 or 3 year old,
Yeah.
you know, and, but it worked. For
Yeah.
3 days, we still learned a lot and we still had a connection, through all the experience that they took me through. But the first one that I remember mainly that was confusing was they kept telling me they were going to take me to wasn't a hotel. Essentially, they were going to take me to a like an Airbnb, but the word wasn't coming out like correct, and it was like I kept going, what are they talking about? Where are we going? And it was
Yeah.
like 2.5 hours outside of Seoul.
Mm.
So again, I didn't know why we were going there. And so later they explained that the reason we were going that direction was because we were going to go past the grave sites of my parents.
Mm.
That was one of the first things they really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So, and so,
I think looking back, in your lifetime of when you could have met your siblings, it came at a time when you were becoming a father. You had become a father, um, and now you have three. Um, how did meeting your parents and reconnecting with the biological roots, um, did it shift your thinking of how you wanted to raise your children in terms of their identity as a Noack, but also as somebody whose dad now just had reconnected with his siblings?
yeah. Uh, Again, I've had such a close relationship with my parents, you know, over the years already that I have a good sense of family, and that's a very important thing to me. And by meeting my biological siblings, it just increased
Mhm.
my family, but just on a different side of it. So it's the Korean side now, but it's still a family emotion and connection, and I definitely want that to be very important to my kids. And one of the things that we did when we did visit the graveyard, the grave sites for my parents, is it made me realize that was very important to do because I wanted to do that anyway. But this was the first time that all of the kids and the parents were together. This of 40 years, this
Wow.
is the moment that we were all together. And they showed me the tombstone. There was actually a space on the tombstone because they put all the names of the descendants on the tombstones. There was a space for my name. They had, they had kept it open. So after all these years,
Gonna go back and put your son's names on there as well?
hmm yeah, they discussed that they wanted to add both my name, Allison's name, and then my kids too. And
That's
so,
beautiful, man. That's
uh, yeah.
I this is a story that I think, um, most of us need to hear, but we don't hear enough because every story is so unique. The circumstance in which our brothers and sisters were adopted and where they ended up and how did that impact their identity. Um, I can't imagine growing up, as the one of handful of Asians in Oklahoma in the 70s. Like it's hard now being Asian in this country. I think you are brave for sharing and even wanting to, because you and I had talked about it. Is this something that you wanted to share, or I find it extremely humbling. Again, going back to the things that so many of us take for granted, which is we just always grew up eating Korean food, right? Like we just know customs and words and, things that we equate to something we were born with almost. And then to, meet so many great friends personally, um, who are who have a different Korean American experience. And that's amazing and beautiful because who says there should be only one? So I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I think it's awesome. Um, you are really one of the best guys that I've gotten to meet, through collaboration
Yeah,
and through everything. Always helpful and always, being the connector and everything. And um, it's been amazing and it's been beautiful. So thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah,
Um, there's no good way to segue from that conversation. Um, But I do want to touch light on, you as a creative entrepreneur. You own a number of different photography related businesses. You on your own. And given all that's going on, there's so many different elements to what we are experiencing here, as a result of the coronavirus. One is obviously the economic impact. I guess even before that, it was just a social impact of events were being canceled. Um,
hmm
your revenue stream and your clientele, big in the event space, whether it is weddings or parties or festivals or corporate events. Um, Tell me like what the last 30 days have been for you from that perspective.
yeah. It's been like you said, a lot of cancellations. Not even postponements for me. I've had a lot of friends in the industry that have had postponements at least until either the end of the year or next year. But a lot of my jobs were corporate jobs for the beginning of the year, and so for March and April, the amount of jobs that I lost just disappeared, and so all of this income stream that I expected that I was going to get for those months was gone, and it's tough and it's unfortunate, but it's that's a part of the unknown of owning your own business and of also being, I guess, smart in business itself and having a security and having a fallback plan for situations like this. So even though I lost all the business that I would normally have been doing for March and April, I'm not, you know, I'm not in a situation where I'm, eating ramen every day. Um, so that's at least I am fortunate and lucky enough in that regard, and I'm also happy to be home and being with my kids more and helping out around the house right now. So
What are some of the conversations that are happening within the photographer and creative community, here in Southern California? Because not everybody is in your position where there are other things helping to make ends meet or just maintain
mm,
life. Um, I mean, are I don't know, what that must feel like, particularly some of our younger brothers and sisters out there who were just getting started or,
mhm.
may not have had the time to build up a security. What are some of
Yeah,
the things that you're hearing and some of the things that we can do to try to help them in this time?
yeah. There's a lot of people. I'm in multiple groups of photographers, wedding planners, DJs, videographers that are all just like, what do we do? Some of them are lucky enough to have retainers for certain dates that again were postponed, so
Mhm.
they kept the retainers and just transferred that over to the new dates. So that is good for them. Others were not so lucky. Some were completely canceled because the unknown of when this whole thing is going to start lining up, when they can have events again of large numbers. And so a lot of people are worried. They don't know what to do, and so they're looking at other avenues. I know some that have gotten other jobs that have tried to do what they can just to make ends meet and drive for Uber Eats or something and just get a little bit of money somewhere wherever they can. I know some people are selling gift certificates, so buying gift certificates for their services for future dates. And that's one way that they're at least getting some income now. But
Yeah, I think it's something that I was having a conversation with Jenny Huang, who is in the restaurant marketing world, and you know um, thinking of ways that we can mobilize the community to help. It's the same umbrella, right? It's service
Mhm.
business. It's people who and mostly entrepreneurs who've decided that being there for people's precious events, whether it be weddings or corporate gigs or catering, or being the host at a restaurant of these special moments is what people is what they wanted to do. And in this time, I think it's challenging. And I think pre-buying things might be a way that we can really, get behind, right? And I think, I look at my family. It's like, well, assuming things don't drastically change between now and October, we'll probably want, or consider getting holiday photos of some sort, or things that I think make us feel even emotionally a little bit like life will get back to normal at some point. Um, so, yeah, I think if you're listening to this show, if you're watching this show somewhere, and you have a photographer that you used for your family photos last year, or you had them at your wedding, or you had them at your children's birthday parties, reach out and then just ask. I mean, you don't even need to ask, but just check in on them.
Yeah,
It's hard to find silver linings in this sort of atmosphere. um, we don't know when it's going to get back to normal, if we ever will even get back to normal, the way that we knew the world. And but people still have to live on, and pay our bills, and feed our kids, and do right by the community. Um, yeah, I haven't really thought of prepaying for creative services, but I think that is something that is amazing. Or just I need a new headshot myself, right? And it's
yeah,
um, so figuring out a way to do it digitally. I don't know. Get photography coaching, or you know,
Mhm.
um, do a Zoom class where you teach somebody to how to use different types of cameras, or
Yeah,
photo editing. There's so many different ways, I think, that people have already started to get super creative on ways
definitely.
to um, stay the hell home, number one, but also to flip on a camera or a microphone, and reach the masses. So um,
Yeah,
I if you are a photographer or a wedding DJ or a wedding, I mean, you're an entrepreneur because you have a creative spirit and the will to work through challenges. So I do hope that we can all get by these challenging times uh, as least scathed as possible. I don't think unscathed is a reality, particularly here in Southern California, where um, the mayor just said yesterday, May, which is
yeah,
6 to 8 weeks from now, which seemed impossible to even 2 weeks
yeah,
ago. So yeah, if you are a photographer, reach out to me, reach out to anybody else. Let's figure out a way to get some sort of movement going. I think in the scale of urgency, restaurant friends are the most urgent, because those are physically closing, and those
hmm
seem more real to us because those are brick and mortar touch feel places that we've been to. But there is an entire economy and industry of folks whose work is really in the creative field, that we should be there for them as well. And um, I don't have all the answers. I will never have all the answers. But if there's a way for us to help shine a light into somebody that needs a little bit of help today, or um, help them open some doors, that's what I think this community is really, really there for. And so, um, Nathan, thank you again for coming on to share your story. I think, given the entire context of who you are and where what your journey has been, and where you are now, I think it's um, you know there's no stereotypical Asian American story, but this is yours, and I think it's awesome. um, so I want to
thank
end the
you.
show. I want to end the show in a way that we end all of our shows. It's the name of the show, Dear Asian Americans. My vision for the show was more of a conversation, and this one would be a letter to us, from us, people that look like us, people that have our similar stories. And so, yeah, however you want to interpret it. We've had some people rap, we've had some people pre-write things, we've had some, it's this is a chance to be creative and as expressive as you'd like. I'll start the letter and help us close out the show, Nathan. Dear Asian Americans.
Uh, I would say be true to yourself and um, don't worry about the hardships that will happen because they will happen. Unforeseen things will happen. All you can do is be yourself, do what you love, and the fact that you know for many years you might think one path is the correct one, and then all of a sudden you change your path in deciding a different something that you never wanted to do is now something that's on your plate to do first, and you never know how that's going to turn out until you do it. And so whether it be searching for a family or changing careers or making a leap towards someone that you know find attractive and you just want to make a connection. Honestly, there's so many things and you'll never know how they'll be until you try. And so try. Let's make the best of it.
Thanks, man. In thinking about our conversation, it's really, I'd say funny, but just magical the way the world works. If you hear PK's story of how he started collaboration in the first place, it's just either you believe in a higher power or some sort of alignment of the stars that had to happen. You had to be in LA. You had to be volunteering at a show that I happened to be volunteering at. And, many, many years now, though probably we've only seen each other face to face a handful of times between then, through, the wonderful world of Facebook and then through our community groups, it's helped build and maintain relationships with you. And I thank you. You've captured a magical moment and for my family that um, we still smile over constantly. Know that you've done that for countless families and countless couples and even the grumpy business people. I'm sure they proudly use a Nathan Nowack photo on their LinkedIn profile. And um, man, I think you are just in your own way of capturing that moment and giving that gift to people. Really been a light to me and to a lot of other people. So thank you. It's really been fun. I've been looking at your kids for the last 45 minutes, and it's I it's been great. We'll get through these challenging times together. If there are people in your network that photographers or other creatives that need an extra hand, let us know. We'll try to do what we can to connect the dots. And there's a lot going on, but good or bad and challenging times, we hope to get out of this alive and stronger as a community and then stronger as human beings. So Nathan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry.
And I'm sure my wife will gladly agree. We'll see you back in the fall for our holiday photos, brother.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Be safe. Be healthy.
Thank you. You
Good.
too.
Bye.